Turn our attention now to local politics. The chairman of the House Economics Committee, David Coleman, joins me. David, thanks very much for your time. I want to start by getting your thoughts on the comments made by Catherine Livingstone today, the BCA chief. This follows an election where they were critical, basically, of the policy prescriptions of both sides, essentially saying that there's that both sides need to face up to the harsh realities of chronic budget deficits. This and the Financial Review today. What do you make of this critique from the head of the BCA?
Well, look, I think in terms of the need for ongoing structural reform of the budget is absolutely the case, and that's why the government is very committed to consistently improving the budget position. We've already made significant progress in that regard. And of course, Labor, when they came in, had $50 billion of cash in the bank and left us with $200 billion of debt. So there is a very substantial task there, and we've made meaningful progress, but there's more to be done, and certainly I, for one, and certainly the government as a whole are very committed to ongoing budget reform.
You're going to be chairing, or you're the chair of the House Economics Committee, as I mentioned in your introduction, and the focus will be in part on the bank chiefs and why they haven't passed on the rate cuts in full. At least one of your coalition colleagues, Wacker Williams, Senator John Williams of New South Wales, says he, for one, would be supporting a royal commission over the committee handling this. What's your response to him and others, including Labor, saying that this needs to be much stronger than just simply the House of Representatives Committee looking at the banks? Well,
Kieran, what the Prime Minister and Treasurer have announced here is a very significant structural change to the way in which the banks have oversight in Australia, because this isn't a one-off inquiry of the House of Representatives Committee. This is an ongoing situation where this year, next year, every year, the banks will be called before the House of Representatives Economics Committee at least once a year to address what will no doubt be a wide variety of questions from members of that committee. That is going to create, I believe, a significant cultural change in the banking industry, requiring those banks to appear before the committee at least once a year, and that is going to be a very significant change. Now, in terms of Labor's comments about a royal commission, I mean, let's call those for what they are. I mean, that is simply a cheap populist expression from the Labor Party. Royal Commission take years. It had cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And as you know, Kieran, ASIC already has very significant powers for enforcement mechanisms in cases of malfeasance or wrongdoing. You know, when you ask Labor, well, what would be the terms of reference of a Royal Commission, Bill Shorten says, well, here's a few things I jotted down in the back of the cab on the way to the studio. You know, that's not serious governance, Kieran. And what the Prime Minister's announced is a very significant change to the oversight of the banks.
But in terms of your, how do you see this operating through the committee? Is it broader than just the rates question? Obviously, that's the one that hits people in the hip pocket. So it's obviously the one politically potent issue, but it goes further than this, doesn't it, in terms of the malfeasance that you referred to? If there are questions to be asked in terms of financial advice, for example, the various scandals we've seen in recent times, would you see your role in pursuing those questions as well via the committee?
Well, look, we'll get our detailed terms of reference when Parliament resumes, Kieran, but I certainly wouldn't anticipate that we would have an overly narrow scope in our activities. There are a range of areas that we'll be looking at, and as you say, there are questions about the failure of the banks to pass on those recent interest rate cuts. It's not the first time that's happened, and that does raise questions that no doubt the committee will want to explore about why those rate cuts haven't been passed on. What does that say about competition in the sector? And I think there are a number of structural questions that the committee will be looking into, and I expect the hearings to be quite detailed and quite rigorous.
Well, we look forward to chatting to you throughout those various periods when you have the bank chiefs before you, because clearly it's of great interest to many of our viewers as well, just how they're going to defend some of their behaviour in recent times. I want to ask you finally about the GST distribution. The Prime Minister has promised a floor basically under what states will receive as their share of Commonwealth revenue. Saul Estlake, the respected economist, said overnight, WA's persistent bleating has reminded me of a pensioner who's won the lottery and then starts complaining about losing the pension.
Well, look, Saul Estlake is often good for a colourful quote, Kieran, but what I would say in relation to this matter is, look, there are anomalies in the way that the system works at the moment, and I don't think anyone would dispute that there are some anomalies in the way the formula works. What the Prime Minister has announced is a review of that system to look at putting in place a floor, as you say, so that I guess the disproportionality between what some states raise and what they received would be reduced by locking in a floor when the system returns to a more normal distribution from where it is now. And I think looking into that and working through that is very sensible. So it's not just about WA votes? Sorry?
It's not just about the state election coming up in WA?
Well, no, Kieran, I think, people have been saying for years that there are issues in the way the distribution of the GST works, and I'm not sure that there's a serious person who's looked at this issue who would say to you, well, it's a perfect mechanism at the moment. So why wouldn't the government look at putting in place a floor to seek to improve the equity in the system?
David Coleman, Chair of the House Economics Committee, talk to you soon.